probably ignoring the best free tool to catch threat actors early. And it's not some fancy EDR, it's actually threat reports. But here's the problem. Most people are reading them like bedtime stories instead of blueprints for detection. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how I skim, prioritize, and extract actionable insights from the reports like this one and help you walk away with real defenses you can implement today. Hey, what's up everybody? So this video that you're about to watch is something I recorded on the Cyber Threat Perspective podcast that I do with Secure IT 360 where I work. Brad and I talk about how to analyze threat reports for defenders. We go through kind of what threat reports are, why they're important, what are some of the important aspects that you need to consider when going through these reports, and a whole bunch of stuff. But I also did a screen recording and screen kind of capture going through an actual report from the DFIR report and kind of talking through some of the things that I think are important or some of the things that I would pull out as a defender. Some things that I think will help you prioritize, help you build detections, help you catch threat actors early, mitigate threats, and things like that. So this video that you're going to watch is kind of my second half of that podcast. So if you want to go check that out, you can go over to offsec.blog and find that episode or check a link in the description. So I hope you enjoy, I hope you get value. What I want to emphasize is, I'm going to look at this at a lens of stuff that we have a pretty good idea won't typically get blocked outright by EDR. So, for example, the threat actor uses Mimikatz in this. If you download Mimikatz and you run it, it's probably going to get blocked. And if not, I would check to see if your antivirus is even turned on. I don't know. But I'm really focused on techniques. I'm focused on methodology and kind of understanding what the threat actor is doing and a little bit of kind of where they're going or why they're heading in that direction, so we can get a sense of what their motivations are to kind of get in front of it, get ahead of it.
Love it.
So I'm going to jump to, by the way, the DFIR report is super great. They have got a key takeaway section. They've got their services, obviously, but then they've got a great table of contents. So you can quickly jump to each section. So I'm going to jump to initial access. So, this all started from a Confluence RCE, so remote code execution vulnerability in Confluence. So that's how the threat actor got in. Obviously, a takeaway is and I mentioned this earlier, if you have Confluence, it's not patched, you should patch it super quickly. But that goes for all the other software that's on the internet, right, that you are using, your SaaS products, anything that you're hosting. The time to exploitation has never been faster, and it continues to exponentially get quicker every single week, every single month. And there are numerous examples we can point to that indicate to that. But for me, kind of quick takeaways, if I'm like a cybersecurity person defending an organization or a SOC analyst, is I'm looking at, the exploit path, I'm looking at user agents, and probably like the content of the request for this exploit. So we can see that it's there's a post request for, let me zoom in on this. There's a post request for /template /AUI text inline right there. Kind of looking at the post request, looking at the commands that were run or the body of the post request to look for suspicious indicators there. And what a threat actor might potentially be using for this exploit. So those are some of the quick things that I think of right immediately, like in the initial access section. AnyDesk, lolbins, and encoded PowerShell. So I mentioned earlier, LOL RMM. It's a website that you can go to look at all the different RMM products. If you're not blocking every single RMM except the ones you use, you're kind of leaving an opportunity for threat actors, right? Or you're leaving opportunity for abuse. You're allowing them to get on second base. So what this indicates to me is if I don't have some sort of app control where I can block those things, that's something I potentially might need, right? I need some way to block these very legitimate remote management tools from executing in my environment. We can look at RMMs. We can, create rules for AnyDesk or the various other RMM tools for encoded PowerShell. Those are all things that I think are very quick wins that you can implement in your environment that are pretty noticeable. Going down further to persistence, we see more AnyDesk, right? But also new user creation. This is something we test for in all of our purple teams. And I would say most of the time it's not getting detected. And that is, if you create a new user and add it to the local admins group, is that being alerted on, right? It should be. And if it's not, you need to create some rules for it, because this is a very common technique for threat actors to maintain persistence, right? They install an RMM, and then they will create a new user so that if the user account that they compromised initially gets disabled or locked out or something like that, they have an account that they can still use and get into as a local admin. And this is all very much detectable. Most EDR platforms, so when we do our pen tests, most EDR platforms have the logs for this. They have the telemetry to be able to alert on this, but not all of them do. Yep. So this is something you could really quickly and easily test in your environment. Moving on to credential access. The thing I wanted to focus on with credential access is the Veeam credentials. So they used an open source tool called Veeam Creds. It's on GitHub. You can download it and test it in your environment. Obviously, you want to read through the code, understand it, all that. But you could test this in your environment to see what logs get created, what events are generated, and look for things that you can use to key on to identify that activity. And then this kind of illustrates the importance of script lock logging. Your EDR product does get some of this telemetry by itself, but I always think it's a good idea if you have a SIM to turn on script lock logging and send those logs to your SIM anyways, so you have a secondary source that you can key off of things and build alerts and detections on. The other kind of aspect of this is the plain text credentials. So the threat actor discovered a text file on a file share that contained IT-related clear text passwords.
What a surprise.
For the domain admin account.
That never happens, dude. That never happens. What are you talking about?
Yeah, and I can't tell you how realistic this is. And this is one of the reasons why I love DFIR Report, because it points out things like this. This is the real stuff. Like, it's not always fancy 0 days and they get in, like they're doing all this sophisticated stuff. It's like compromised account, they log in, they search the shares, admin credentials. This stuff is super real and it's out there in many environments. And just, to me, the takeaway as a defender is like, I should probably just go look in my shares right now or run a script or just, check regularly just to make sure my admins, just to make sure I didn't accidentally leave credentials out there or something that a threat actor could use, right?
Yep. And just for a side quip, last week you were able to, before noon on day one, get system level access to the crown jewels on your pen test, right?
Yeah, SQL creds in a web config on a file share, right? That shouldn't have been there. It's the exact same scenario.
Yeah, man. So this is, to your point, very realistic, and it happens all the flipping time. And what I love the most about this is it's something you can fix on your own for free without any tools, right? You can literally use Windows search to go search these things and find stuff. So, you don't need a high level of sophistication. You don't need all these fancy tools. The TTPs in a lot of these cases are relatively simple. Like, they haven't done anything yet that is like, oh wow, that's super crazy. Like, it's all standard stuff, man.
Yeah, definitely. One funny thing from the discovery section is the threat actor accidentally killed their remote session, their C2 session. So they had to re-exploit the vulnerability in Confluence to get back in.
That's amazing.
There are some funny things that threat actors do, like mistyping commands or funny things like that you could actually, kind of key on. Because if you know some of the patterns that are common mistakes, and one of them is like running shell who am I on the shell. So like threat actor will initiate like a CMD process, and then they'll run shell who am I. Shell is a BOF in Cobalt Strike for running shell commands. So you have to run shell and then the thing. And sometimes that'll show up in these reports. Kind of a funny, sidebar. Another thing I wanted to point out was NetScan. So NetScan is a otherwise legitimate, network scanner. It can do network scans. It can look at shares and, some other fun stuff. But this again indicates to me the behavior of the threat actor, right? They would prefer to use known legitimate software like AnyDesk, like NetScan, etc., for their operations and for their, tooling than, write some custom, thing. They just like to use stuff that's known, trusted, signed, built in, just use with the tools that they have available to them. The one takeaway I have for lateral movement, kind of RDP, is firms are now implementing MFA on RDP, right? Or at least for admin sessions on RDP, using like Duo or Okta or something like that. What's great is they have MFA, but you also have to look at the other protocols like PS remoting, SMB. There are other protocols that you can use to enumerate processes remotely or move laterally to another host that are not RDP based, right? So you need to be looking at those and kind of identifying how to restrict those. But this is an indicator that says, hey, I should probably make sure RDP is pretty locked down, or like my servers are isolated, that kind of thing. But the last two things, and then we'll wrap up. This threat actor used a hosting provider called Fly Servers, and it's been reported before in other blogs that it's being used by Lockbit, right? So remember when I said we want to kind of understand who it is that's doing the attack? This is a good indicator that it's some sort of ransomware group that is, conducting this attack, right? Or an affiliate of Lockbit in this case. So having that information is important because you can kind of piece together some of their methodologies or techniques that they would use as opposed to, a threat actor. So a nation state, right? A nation state might drop some custom built, like command and control, like malware, and be very sophisticated. Lockbit's going to use, Meterpreter and Metasploit and, off the shelf kind of open source C2 frameworks, and they're going to use AnyDesk and stuff like that. The last piece is the impact section. And this is becoming something that I've noticed more popular, is PDQ deploy being used for ransomware. PDQ deploy is a great, automation tool for IT admins. Many of you are probably familiar with it, but it's also great for threat actors, right?
Yeah.
And this goes back to application control and just understanding the techniques that threat actors are using to perform their operations. And PDQ deploy is becoming more popular, just like RMM products are becoming more popular. That's my 10 or 12 minute speed run on looking at threat reports.
And one thing I want to add, and I know we're up on time, but one of the things that we would do is create a supplementary report that was intended for consumption by executives. And that report would contain, here are all the controls that we have. Here are the categories of TTPs that the threat actor is using that falls into that same thing, right? So we'll just use EDR because it's an easy example. All right, so would we successfully detect initial access? Yes or no, or unsure, right? And how are we going to figure that out? And so we would map these things. You actually had some notes in here about mapping, and that's something that we would do, is we would report on, what the threat actor was doing, where we would catch it in our security stack, what our confidence level was, and then we would go fix it, right? If it wasn't a 10 out of 10 confidence that we would identify that, that's my new job. That's the only thing that I'm going to do for the next 48 hours is figure out how we're going to address that. But breaking it down into that will help you identify two things. One, are the controls you have working relative to the threats you're facing? And two, do you even have controls in some of these categories? Because I think some people might be surprised to find out that they might not even have visibility into some of this stuff. So, listing out your controls, comparing them to the TTPs will help you get a long way in identifying your readiness for some of these threat actors.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the ultimate goal, right? It's to make our organization a little bit more secure today than it was yesterday. That's why our podcast exists, for that same reason. So remembering your goals and why you're going through these reports is super helpful. If you found this helpful or valuable, please subscribe. If not, roast me in the comments.